We're live. We're live.
Okay, we're going to take two here because our first one that we tried was so good that we were muted. The enemy was like, this one is going to be so good that we're just going to mute your microphone. Okay, so we are unmuted and we're ready to roll. So welcome everybody, Mike and Janelle Friedrich with Marriage Ignite, where we ignite the passion, peace, and connection into marriages and help couples live out the Bible's blueprint for it. And so we're going to be talking about today communication, how to sabotage your communication in your marriage, but we're going to be talking about communication as a whole, because here's the things: if we sabotage our communication, we're sabotaging our marriage altogether. And so we always like to say that we work with couples, but we also work with women, because 90 to 95% of the time, women are the first ones to reach out. And so we like to share that. But communication, going back to this, that it's the number one thing, is, babe, I mean, that couples come to us with, is that they want breakthrough in their communication. And so we talk about it a lot, because as much as we offer strategies, we're going to offer some things for you to consider, because what's happening in the spirit realm is even greater than what's happening in the natural. And most of the time, you know, if we focus just on strategy, how to overcome conflict, which is great, but we're not recognizing what's happening in the spiritual realm, there's a greater game that we're missing out on. And so, but we are going to be talking about these four things because they are so common. And one of our mentors in marriage is John Gottman. Him and his wife have studied marriage for over 30 years, in fact, 40 years, if I'm correct. And they are one of the world's leading experts. And one of the studies that they did, and one of the things that they're known for, is that John Gottman can predict a marriage will either succeed or fail with a 93% degree of accuracy within a 15-minute time frame of just watching how a couple interacts. 15 minutes, 93% degree of accuracy, whether they're going to divorce within 7 years, which is pretty crazy. But what he noticed is that these four things, when they're present in how a couple communicates, is going to determine whether a couple is going to succeed in marriage or fail. And the truth of the matter is, we don't want couples just not divorcing. Like, we are after a much bigger game, and we want couples to not just have good communication, but we want them to really develop a beautiful friendship and beautiful intimacy, because isn't that what we're all after, right? Because if all we're just focusing on is conflict resolution, then you're never going to have an excellent marriage. Like, we've got to focus on how do you develop true intimacy and true friendship. And that's the big game that we're after. But with that said, we are going to focus on four things that are real practical things that I think many couples, and when you look at your own marriage, I want you to just take an honest look at which one of these, and maybe all of them are at play, but which one of these are undermining your communication and undermining your marriage. Because even if there's one of them that's prevalent, I want you to consider the impact that it's having.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did a Facebook Live on this months ago, and we got so much incredible feedback, because it's the one thing that will take you out.
For sure.
Yes, it will take out your marriage. And so as you're listening to these four things, think about, whoa, I'm doing this. Wow. You know, your spouse might be doing some of these things too, but we really want you to pay attention to you. And is this happening in your marriage right now? And so we wanted to go live and talk about these again, because they're so powerful and people are dealing with them so much, especially with a lot of the pressure and like what's going on in our country, what's going on in our world, the stress of finances, the stress of work, kids, all the things that these even rear their ugly head even more when we're under stress or when we're under pressure. And a lot of times we get into this vicious cycle and we don't know how to get out. And then you get to a point where you're like, wow, we are like roommates. I don't know. I think I love you, but I'm not really in love with you. We fight all the time. There's constant bickering. We can't agree on anything. We're fighting about household responsibilities. We're fighting about finances, about the children, about work, about we never spend time together. We're not going out on dates. I mean, it just causes this vicious cycle. And most of the time people don't know how to get out. And so when Mike talked about at the beginning, we work with couples, and when couples come to us and there's unity on that they both want breakthrough, the results are astounding, especially if you do it God's way. Because we believe that you will have 100% success in your marriage if you do it God's way. But then we've had so many women come to us and say, you know what, my husband doesn't want help right now. Not yet. And so we started to work with just the women because we truly believe that the women and men, I mean, men too can transform the marriage, but the women can come in because they're the ones that's longing for the help. They're longing for the change, and they can come in and transform the marriage. And so whether you're a couple watching this, male, female, whether you're a female by yourself, like just be listening to what of these four ways that you're sabotaging your communication are rearing their ugly head. It might be all four, it might just be one, but you remember that none of them should be rearing their ugly head. And a lot of times it takes practice on making sure that these are not happening in your marriage. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So let's dive in. Number one, criticism. And this one's deadly, but here's the thing. There's always going to be complaints that you're going to have with your spouse. With me, there's not very many of them because I'm a pretty likable guy. The problem with marriage is that you don't marry someone as perfect as you are. But you left out. Okay, but here's the truth, is that there's a massive difference between a criticism and a complaint. And a complaint are healthy, right? They are focusing on a specific issue that you want to address, whether it be leaving the toilet seat up, or whether it's how fast you're driving, or whether it's how you're spending the money on a particular thing. Like, hey, I'm really upset that you spent money on this because we talked about our budget, and because you're focusing on one specific thing. And that's fine. You're always going to have those in marriage. They should be addressed. But the criticism are the deadly ones. And these are kryptonite, because what you're doing here is you're focusing on, or you're talking about a global expression of like saying, and here's the two telltale signs of criticism. When you're saying the words, you always, or you never.
And this is really key.
Right.
You, like you always, you never do this. You always do this. You do this, you do that. Why are you like this? Right. That's criticism. And I can speak so strongly in this area because that was me. I came into the relationship 22 years ago with a lot of criticism because I couldn't understand that. Remember, he is male, I'm female. He's a man, I'm a woman. God created us and wired us completely differently, but then also he has completely different strengths than I do. And I had a really hard time understanding, why does he think differently? Why does he act differently? Why does he do things differently than I do? And we realized that it had to be a lifelong discovery of understanding each other's differences. And so it's really easy that if things aren't going our way, or if he's not doing things the way I like it, he's not making the kids' lunches the way I want it, right? He's not cleaning the house the way I like, or he's not cleaning the house at all, or he's not whatever, right? It's very easy to come into the relationship, or maybe you never used to have this, and then all of a sudden you do now, where it's you always, you never. And it's a great place to look on if you're constantly living in the criticism. Now, this was an area that I really had to work on because I'm a very strong woman. And a lot of you that are probably listening right now, you're a really strong woman and you like things a certain way, you like things done a certain way. And so it's very easy to go into the role of criticism.
Are you saying you always used to criticize?
Well, I just did it a lot. And I until I was ready to come to, wow, this is not working. I don't want to be this way. It doesn't feel good. And I started to take responsibility for my words. I started to take responsibility for my response. I started to take responsibility of, okay, wait, this isn't going to work anymore. And I've got to be willing to look in the mirror.
One other thing I'll add to that, if I can jump in here, is that our words, they are nuclear in the spirit realm. And so what happens is when we start criticizing, we're actually sowing a really bad seed into our marriage, and we're expecting our spouse to change their behavior. And not only that, worse, we're expecting God to bless it, which is like, how can God bless your marriage when you just sowed a bad seed into your marriage and you're expecting some type of good harvest? It doesn't work that way. In fact, we've never talked to a couple and had them come to a conversation with us and say, you know what? I just got reamed out last night and I got cussed out by my spouse, but you know what? Now I see what they mean. And I am so grateful that they shared that with me, because now I'm a changed person. Okay. They've never said that, but what they have said is that those words deeply hurt me and wounded me. And that's what criticism does.
Well, and it's the whole sowing and reaping.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's That's the principle it boils down to.
Yeah.
Or from the Bible, the sowing and reaping, whatever you sow into the marriage is what you're going to get.
For sure.
Mhm.
All right. So let's get into number 2, which is contempt. All right. And this one arises out of a sense of superiority over the other. And it's basically a form of disrespect. And it shows up meaning in the form of using mean sarcasm, eye rolling, one of these, thinking your spouse isn't going to see it, or mockery, or even hostile humor. I mean, those are all examples of it. And it's basically impossible to resolve any type of problem when one of you is basically sending the message to the other person that you're disgusted with the other. All right.
Well, it could also be tone. It could be a sign.
For sure. Yeah.
That kind of thing. I'm talking about those two because those two were also two that reared their ugly head. And so just pay attention to when those are coming up.
And, this one can show up disguised really well as maybe you're trying to be funny, but really what it is, it's mean sarcasm, and I'll admit sometimes my humor gets the best of me. Sometimes it's gotten me in trouble, although I've gotten really good at it. Okay. I'm pretty aware now, and I've gotten a lot more wisdom over, the 22 years that we've been together. And so sometimes I can just get a little bit more comfortable with Janelle than maybe I should. But although it's rare now, like me, I can make comments that are funny, but sometimes in the moment, I think they're funny, but they're really not funny. And I'll just blurt stuff out that maybe aren't as funny as I thought they would be. So it's only funny if it's funny to both of you. Okay. If it's funny just to you, it's a form of contempt to the other person. So that's the second one, is contempt. Third one is defensiveness. And so this one's so common, but really what you're saying here is that it's not my problem. It's actually your problem, and you need to deal with it, which all you're doing, or all we're doing here, is we're escalating the conflict. And this is why it's so deadly. So, when Janelle and I have moments of intense fellowship or passion, however you want to call it, I don't worry anymore about having to try and defend myself, because I know my identity. And I know I'm not 100% perfect, and I'm not going to be in my identity 100% of the time. But you can either be happy or you can be married, and you get to choose. So when you try to win arguments, you're not really winning anything. Okay. But basically what you're happening here is when you get defensive, you're staying stuck in positions of guilt, shame, self-protection. All right. Which is just, lead me into my third way to sabotage your marriage. Okay. And this is what happens when you get defensive. Okay. That's what's really going on, is you're getting in self-protection mode. Okay. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness. Okay. They don't follow any particular order. So any one of those last three that I just talked about, any one of those can pop up first. Well, defensiveness usually is going to pop up second, right? Because that's going to pop up after a criticism. Okay. Now, when I make a criticism to Janelle, all right, this is going to typically lead to defensiveness, and that's going to lead to typically contempt, and around we go. Okay. Now, they don't always follow a particular order, but again, it just starts this cycle. And what happens is you just don't, what you were talking about earlier, you don't know how to get yourself out of it. Now, those three things, they can pop up in any order, right? But what those three then lead into is our fourth one, which is stonewalling. Now, if you don't want to jump in here, you can. If you're,
go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
So the fourth one is stonewalling. And so this is the fourth one. And this is usually the male, but not always. But this one enters into the picture when criticism, contempt, our defense, and defensiveness are present. And this is where basically one of you just starts tuning out. Okay. And this fourth method of sabotage usually shows up later in marriage, because it takes time for those other three to start becoming prevalent in marriage. And so a lot of times when stonewalling happens, and this is where I was really good at this one. I'm not proud of it, but I got really good at it because it was a way for me to just like, okay, I just got flooded and I just didn't know how to kind of communicate my way out of it anymore. And it was just more of a defense mechanism, because I didn't want to because I would get so flooded that I couldn't even figure out a way to communicate properly.
Well, they say there's a study that's been done when the male's heart rate actually gets up over 100, they can't think clearly. It's an actual, like a study.
Yeah.
that's been done, that they can't think clearly. So if I'm criticizing him, or I don't like what he's doing, or he didn't do what I told him to do when I wanted him to do it, or he did his to-do list before the stuff I asked him to do, whatever, right? You can think of so many scenarios. You probably dealt with one in your marriage today or yesterday, but you can think of all of these different things. And so what happens is the male will just stonewall. So the woman usually comes, and again, it can be either way. Don't take us but like, this is what we see a lot. And when we talk to couples or when we talk to women, this is going on in the marriage, where she'll usually criticize, and then he'll just tune out, and he'll be like, you know what? You don't like the way I'm doing anything. You complain about everything. You criticize me about everything. So you know what? I'm just going to back off. I'll just let you handle everything. I'll let you handle all of the decisions when it comes to the kids, when it comes to the household responsibilities, because I can't seem to do anything right anyway. Yeah. So I'm done. I'm out. And so they end up just checking out. And then they wonder why there's no intimacy, there's no friendship, there's no communication, there's no date nights, there's no spending time together, there's no love in the home. It's constant tension. There's constant bickerness. Bickerness, is that a word?
Bickering.
Bickering.
Sure.
Bickering. So we really want you to look at the 4 ways. So if you want to just recap on the 4 ways, and then I'll close it out.
Yeah. So the first one was criticism. Okay. Understanding criticism versus complaint. Complaints are healthy. Criticism, not so much. So that's number 1. The second one is contempt, eye rolling, mean sarcasm, sighing. Okay. And then the third one is defensiveness. And then the fourth one is stonewalling.
Now listen, the number 1 need for a human being is Jesus. I mean, that's the number 1 need. We all need Jesus. But the number 1 felt need is marriage. That's the number 1 felt need, is that people want to get married. Maybe you're not married and you want to get married, or maybe you are dating and you're wanting to get married, or you're married right now listening to this. And when you're married, it's a number 1 felt need. So when your marriage is a mess, or you have one really big issue, which a lot of times it's communication or finances or sex, and it feels off, and it feels awkward, and it feels a mess, and it's a number 1 felt need is marriage. It'll affect every area of your life. It'll affect your health. It'll affect the way you think. It'll affect the atmosphere in the home. It affects your work, your finances, your business, your children, your legacy. It affects everything if your marriage is a mess. And so we come to these Facebook Lives because we want people to wake up. We want people to understand that time is so precious right now. With what's going on in our world, what's going on in our country, like, we don't have time for our marriage to be a mess. We need to be unifying and be willing to work through our differences, to be able to understand each other's differences, to be able to go, okay, wait, I need to look at myself. I need to look in the mirror. I need to change me, right? I need to grow my personal relationship with Jesus so that I can become a better person, so that I can have joy, I can have love, I can have gentleness, I can have kindness, I can have all fruits of the Spirit, because I'm focused on my relationship with Jesus and changing me, which then in turn, it teaches me how to love my husband, right? When I am overflowing with God's love, that overflow of love pours out into my husband and allows me to love my husband and to love others. And so it's us taking a look at ourselves. And so if you're watching this right now and you need help in this area, and you're going, oh, wow, I have all 4 of these ways of sabotaging my marriage and my communication, or I am dealing with criticism big time, or my husband never talks to me. We don't spend any time together. He just comes home and he flops himself down on the couch and watches TV, whatever it is that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with any of these, don't just do nothing. Don't do nothing. Do something. Wake up and go. You're going to take a stand for your marriage. You're going to take a stand for having an incredible marriage. And you're going to take a stand for doing it God's way, because when you do it God's way, it's blessed. And so reach out. Send us a private message. Okay? Send us a private message, and don't be afraid. Who cares what other people think right now? We're all dealing with stuff, right? We're all dealing with things in our marriage. Every single one of us is. And it's time for you to take a stand out, and you know who you are because you're getting this feeling inside your belly and it makes you feel sick to your stomach. It makes you feel sick to your stomach when you wake up in the morning because you wake up to a spouse that you feel 1,000 miles apart from. You know who you are. And so don't waste another day. Don't waste any more time. It's time to reach out and to get help. And if it's not us, then it's someone else. But it's time to reach out and get help because you can do this. And we know, because we've worked with enough people over the years, that your marriage can be radically transformed. And it can happen quickly, especially if you do it God's way. Now, again, there's always healing. There's always things that need to take place for the marriage to be restored. But we believe that if you do it God's way, there can be 100% success in the marriage. And so we love you. Reach out. Have a good day. God bless.
Bye, everybody.